Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: why Israel-Gaza war might complicate China's Mideast military drone market. Palestinians count losses on second day of Gaza ceasefire. 14 hostages to be released in exchange for 42 Palestinians live. An Israeli-owned ship was targeted in suspected Iranian attack in Indian Ocean, U.S. official tells AP. Palestinians in Gaza use truce to pick through rubble of homes. Why Israel-Gaza war might complicate China's Mideast military drone market. South China Morning Post. China's advanced drone technology could help the country expand its defense industry in the Middle East, despite the region becoming increasingly unstable following the Israel-Gaza war. At the recent Dubai Air Show, over 30 Chinese commercial and defense contractors showcased their latest aerial vehicles and weapons systems, with a focus on unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. China has already exported over 280 combat UAVs in the past decade to countries including Algeria, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. The country plans to continue developing its military through the use of smart technologies and has pledged to speed up the development of unmanned combat capabilities. China's drones are seen as attractive to Middle Eastern countries due to their flexibility and relatively low cost. However, China may face challenges in integrating its systems with Western/NATO origin systems, and the U.S. has warned Middle Eastern countries that access to advanced U.S. weapons systems could be endangered if they integrate too many Chinese weapons and equipment into their militaries. Palestinians count losses on second day of Gaza ceasefire. Wall Street Journal. "14 hostages to be released in exchange for 42 Palestinians live." The Independent. 14 hostages, including 8 children, have been released by Hamas in exchange for 42 Palestinians. This is the second day of hostage swaps as part of a temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The agreement is expected to eventually free over 50 captives of Hamas. This comes as at least 8 trucks carrying fuel and cooking gas were allowed into Gaza, along with 196 trucks of aid supplies. The release of the hostages and the arrival of aid is seen as a positive step towards a more permanent ceasefire and peace in the region. An Israeli-owned ship was targeted in suspected Iranian attack in Indian Ocean, U.S. official tells AP. Yahoo! A container ship owned by an Israeli billionaire came under attack by a suspected Iranian drone in the Indian Ocean as Israel wages war on Hamas in the Gaza Strip, an American defense official said Saturday. Palestinians in Gaza use truce to pick through rubble of homes. Reuters. Following a 4-day pause in fighting, thousands of Gaza residents have begun to return to their homes to assess the damage caused by Israeli airstrikes. Many of the residents are left with nothing but rubble and twisted metal. Aid has started to flow into Gaza in larger quantities, but many people are still struggling to access it. The blockade and fighting has created a humanitarian crisis in Gaza with shortages of electricity, fresh water, fuel, food and medicine. Israel-Gaza, more hostages to be released in second day of truce. The Independent. As part of the ongoing truce between Israel and Hamas, 24 hostages were released from Gaza and transported through the Rafah crossing into Egypt. The hostages included 13 Israeli women and children who were held by Hamas militants, as well as 10 Thai nationals and 1 Filipino who were also being held hostage. In exchange, 39 Palestinian women and teenage boys were released from Israeli detention. This is part of a larger agreement that is expected to eventually free around 50 captives of Hamas. Israeli security officials are currently reviewing a list of potential next wave of hostages who could be released in the coming days. However, the Israeli military has warned civilians in Gaza that the war is not over and will continue. This exchange of hostages is seen as a positive step towards a lasting ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Gaza diplomacy cements Qatar's role as mediator. Wall Street Journal. Qatar's diplomacy in the Gaza war has cemented the country as Washington's preferred interlocutor with extremist groups and pariah states. Over the past 30 years, Qatar has sought to resolve regional disputes and win the trust and gratitude of the U.S. and other Western governments. As a result, it has become a preferred mediator for the U.S. with extremist groups such as Hamas and the Taliban. However, Qatar's willingness to talk to these groups has also left it open to allegations that it supports terrorism, which it denies. Despite these risks, Qatar has become more vocal in defending its position. The country's strategy of acting as a mediator has been particularly risky. In 2017, Saudi Arabia, Egypt and others severed diplomatic and economic ties with Qatar. However, the country's neutrality has also made it indispensable to the U.S. By keeping a visible distance from the US sometimes, Qatar is able to talk to countries that the US cannot. Qatar's role as a mediator has been further strengthened by its financial clout, which has enabled it to fund development programs in countries where it conducts conflict resolution. Peace in the Middle East must look to Abraham Accords. Nikkei Asia. Israel and Hamas have agreed to a temporary ceasefire starting on Friday after weeks of hostilities. Israel seems determined to continue its offensive until it eliminates Hamas, which controls the Gaza Strip. However, this has infuriated Arab nations who support the Palestinians. The fighting in Gaza has resulted in strained relations between Israel and the Arab world, reversing the trend of reconciliation that had been taking place in the region due to their common fear of Iran. The Abraham Accords, which brought about diplomatic ties between Israel and Arab nations, may be put on hold until the conflict in Gaza subsides. Families reunite as Gaza truce holds with more Israeli hostages, Palestinian prisoners set for release. ABC. Hamas is expected to release the second group of Israeli hostages following a 4-day ceasefire in Gaza. Egypt has received the names of 14 Israeli women and children from Hamas and is awaiting further details on when they will be handed over. The Israeli list of Palestinian detainees is currently being reviewed by security officials. The truce is the first break in the 7-week conflict and will see 50 women and children held by Hamas released over 4 days in return for 150 Palestinian women and children held in Israeli jails. So far, 24 Palestinian women and 15 teenagers and a total of 13 Israelis have been released. The former hostages underwent medical checks before being released, with some in relatively good condition. However, the joy of being reunited with loved ones is tinged with bitterness, as Israeli police were seen raiding at least 3 Palestinian homes prior to prisoners' release. Both sides have said that hostilities will resume as soon as the truce ends, although US President Joe Biden has said there is a real chance of extending the truce. Iran says it facilitated Friday's release of 10 Thai hostages. Reuters. Iran has claimed that it facilitated the release of 10 Thai hostages from Gaza on Friday, after providing a list of names to Palestinian group Hamas. The request to Iran was made by Thailand's foreign ministry and parliamentary speaker. Thailand's government says that 20 of its nationals are still being held by Hamas. That's all for today's news from the Middle East. Let's take a moment to recap. First, we discussed how the Israel-Gaza war might complicate China's Mideast military drone market. Despite the instability in the region, China's advanced drone technology could still find a market in the Middle East due to its flexibility and relatively low cost. However, integrating Chinese systems with Western/NATO origin systems may pose challenges, and the US has warned Middle Eastern countries about the potential risks of relying too much on Chinese weapons and equipment. Next, we learned about the ongoing hostage exchanges between Israel and Hamas. As part of the temporary ceasefire, Hamas released 24 hostages on the first day, and Israel freed 39 Palestinians from prison. The second day saw the release of 14 hostages, including 8 children, in exchange for 42 Palestinians. This is seen as a positive step towards a more permanent ceasefire and peace in the region. We also heard about an Israeli-owned ship being targeted in a suspected Iranian attack in the Indian Ocean. This incident highlights the broader tensions in the region and the involvement of various actors. Moving on, we discussed the situation in Gaza following the ceasefire. Thousands of residents have returned to their homes to assess the damage caused by Israeli airstrikes. Aid has started to flow into Gaza, but many people are still struggling to access it due to the ongoing humanitarian crisis in the area. Furthermore, we talked about Qatar's role as a mediator in the Gaza war. Qatar has become Washington's preferred interlocutor with extremist groups and pariah states, despite facing allegations of supporting terrorism. The country's neutrality and financial clout have made it indispensable in conflict resolution. Lastly, we touched on the impact of the Gaza conflict on the Abraham Accords. The fighting has strained relations between Israel and Arab nations, potentially putting the diplomatic ties established by the Accords on hold. In conclusion, the situation in the Middle East remains complex and volatile. The ongoing ceasefire and hostage exchanges are positive steps, but there are still many challenges to overcome. The involvement of external actors like China and Iran further complicates the dynamics in the region. It will be interesting to see how events unfold and whether a lasting peace can be achieved. Now, I'd like to hear from you. What are your thoughts on these developments in the Middle East? Do you have any questions or opinions? Let's discuss. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.